So Guozi was a court painter under Emperor Xuanzong. When you say professional, same as court painter. He painted something like this, and you can imagine this skillful landscape, very fashionable landscape, could have been mounted on the screen and used as a room divider or as a background, elegant background. This one is called Early Spring. How do you know? Because the title is written somewhere around here. And then his name is written, and then the date is also made. So that's why we know it has a firm date of 1072. And do you see the three-level composition? Yes, you do. Foreground, middle ground, and far distance. And is it made on silk? Yes, it's on the silk. Here, near, middle, far ground, right? And do you see a human figure? Yes, there are. I want you to find out how many people are there. This painting really shows well the main components of painting. This is even earlier than Kyunghee's theory. So here again, number one, spirit. Number two, bone method, like a brush strokes. Number three, correspondence to objects. So meaning realistic, right? And suitability to type, like a colors. And then division and planning, and like a composition. And then number six, transmission by copying, based on models. So there are 6 classification of painters. So are you yourself like a level 3 painter or level 6 painter? What would be the best criteria? Of course, you want to be number 1. So what is criteria? The spirit resonance. You capture the spirit. It's like when you paint a portraiture, it may look alike with a sitter, or it may little bit like a sitter, but whatever the case is, a good painting is the one that captures the spirit of the sitter. That is very hard. It has a psychological interpretation. So what Guozi is aiming is, he's good at all the other components, but he really worked hard to get this spirit. So what is the spirit he has to represent? Spirit of early spring, right? So in this painting, where do you see the signs of early spring? Not the late spring, or not the winter time, or the summer. Where? I want you to find that out yourself, or you could have listened to Professor James Cahill's lecture. But one thing that I can tell you is there are several. For example, these like tiny leaves or branches that are growing. Do you see like a claw style? Like a claw means, very pricky, ends of the trees. So there are not big leaves. So that's the sign of the spring. You don't have a lot of leaves because they just went by the harsh winter, right? And then they are trying to gain back that, how do you call it, the spirit of the spring. Like, they want to bloom and blossom, but it's not there yet. So they are working really hard, right? Tiny leaves, the way you have, very tiny hair to become long hair, right? And then another sign of spring is Earth is defreezing right now. It was frozen during the winter time, and it's slightly warming up. So the water is a little bit warmer than the land, so that's why you see a lot of mist here. And not only that, I want you to look at the water. Do you see the water coming out here? Oh, water. This is all water too. And if you close up here, you can also see the valley itself. It has very little water. If it's a high summertime or early autumn time, what will happen? You have a lot of water because it rained so much over late spring and the summertime. So people who are familiar with this landscape, they can identify what the nature is like. So the Song dynasty collapsed because Mongols somehow gained a momentum during this period, and they created a Eurasian empire. And then Kublai is the grandson of Genghis Khan, and he established the Yuan dynasty in China. So finally, he crushed Song dynasty. And again, it was a great humiliation. So Chinese people themselves as Yimin. Like I'm now living in the Yuan dynasty, under the Mongol emperor, but this is like a corrupted word, and I should be called myself Yimin. Yimin means left over. So where were they left from? Left from the southern Song dynasty. And then Mongols became very powerful suddenly from this Mongolian plateau, and then they moved down. Eventually, they conquered the Muslim kingdoms, Iraq and Russia, and all parts of it. And then finally, they came to the Southern Song. So this is the map of Yuan dynasty. So Southern Song resisted a little while, but then eventually this disappeared. This disappeared. Their capital was Karakorum. So after Kublai Khan moved the capital from Karakorum to Beijing, and he ordered the construction of new city in Beijing. So this is the first time ever that China is going to make Beijing as the capital. So right now, what is the capital of the People's Republic of China? It is Beijing. When did it start? From the Yuan dynasty. Kublai abolished the Chinese civic service exam. So there is no official way of Chinese people can be made officers. And then surprisingly, Kublai gave merchants a high social rank. So that really disrupted the Chinese social class. So Mongol court had a dual system. Mongolians on the top, Chinese officials at the bottom. And again, very humiliating. So some intellectuals went to court to work, but they resented it. So Mongols had a lot of important inventions or policies. So this one showing the map of Chinese and the barbarians carved on a stone in 1137. This is a Great War. So inside you have, majority of ethnic Han, Chinese people, and then across the border you have nomads, but then they came in eventually. Yes, this one shows the technological innovations. Why were they so successful as warriors? Because they had technological weapons at the time. And this is the portrait of Kublai Khan. This was made by it's a Tibetan. I mean, he is a court painter, but Liu Guantao originally came from Tibet. So what do court painters do? Something like this, painting ceremony paintings or portraiture or events. So this is the Taoist temple that dates from the Yuan dynasty. And then the international trade was very robust. So these are the Mongol boat that sunk somewhere around here. And then in it, we excavated a lot of Chinese porcelain from 1320. And then here, so during the Yuan dynasty, the most important element is the study of Chinese literati scholars. So court painters, if you want to be, you can be the court painter, but it is humiliating, right? So Chinese literati scholars all moved along that Hangzhou, the area, and then they expressed, this is important, they expressed the loss of the Chinese dynasty. So that's the subject matters. So there are four great masters of Chinese criticism. So these are Wu Zhen, Huang Gongwang, Ni Zan, and Wang Mo. But in this class, we are only going to focus on Ni Zan. So they didn't want to make a realistic painting. They wanted to express their feelings. They didn't want to use silk. Silk are material for court painters. So they only use the paper and brush. So now, so this is Wu Zhen. So you can see this is what you understand as like a Chinese ink painting, right? Like a bamboos, rocks. and then the fishermen again foreground, middle ground, and then the far distance. And because they are living in the south, they were heavily influenced by Song Yuan, like that southern style landscape from the Song dynasty. So Ni Zhan is a purist. You will see what the purist means. So he didn't even delineate the wave. This is the foreground, like island. All of this is the river or the lake. Then you have a little bit of mountains. The most important work is Ni Zhan's Long Sea Studio, made in 1372. So where do you see the studio? Here. Does it look like a house? No, it looks more like a beach umbrella, right? Like it's made of the thatches. It's like the dried grain stalks. And how many trees? Ni Zhan never painted many trees because he didn't want to show crowded, corrupt world. So he's a purist, a minimalist of few trees, 3 or 4. And then again, these are all like a mist or the river or the lake, part of the lake. And then what do you have? Some mountains in the far distance. So here he intentionally used the light ink. He didn't want to have a descriptive painting. He just wanted to convey his feelings. So this is a small pavilion that a medical doctor owned along the Yangtze River. And Ni Zhan was traveling. Mostly he was traveling because he was contemptuous of this world ruled by Mongols. So here, do you see any sign of human figures? This is a very important question. And this is a clue. Ni Zhan's contempt for the human creature. So I'm going to read it. This is a commentary by Tao Chi. He said, the paintings by Master Ni are like waves on the sandy beach, or streams between the stones, which roll and flow and issue by their own force. The air of supreme refinement, this is important word, supreme refinement and purity. It's so cold. Do you see that it's freezing, like a cold that it overawes people? Painters of later times have imitated only the dry and desolate or thinnest parts, meaning usually brushwork they try to imitate. And consequently, their copies have no far-reach spirit. Again, spirit is very important criteria of good work. So this is the end. But in the exam, there is definitely a question about Ni Zhan's Long Sea Studio. So I want you to watch Professor Cahill's lecture on Lian Dynasty and get some more information about the Ni Zhan. And also you can get more information on Ni Zhan at timeline of art history. So I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to finish today's lecture. So much, and this is the end of Unit 2, and I'll see you again in Unit 3.